Hello, and thank you for joining today's Cintoo webinar, where we will talk about how Turner Construction used Cintoo to track issues in a billion-dollar construction project. My name is Rob Rasnick, and I am the Chief Sales Officer here at Cintoo, and I want to go over a few housekeeping rules for today. This webinar will be recorded for future use. If you have questions, please type those in the Q&A panel, and we will answer at the end of the presentation. For today's agenda, we will have an introduction to Autodesk Construction Cloud, given by Jeremy Wallen with Autodesk. Next, we will go through how Jonathan Evans at Turner Construction used Cintoo to help track issues in a billion-dollar construction project. Following that, we will have Nicholas Zarnick, who will give the latest new features on Cintoo, followed by a Q&A session at the end. It is my pleasure to welcome today's speakers. First, we have Jeremy Wallen, who is Strategic Partnership and Alliances at Autodesk. Jonathan Evans, who is a VDC Project Manager at Turner Construction. And Nicholas Zarnick, who is a Customer Success Manager at Cintoo. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Jeremy Wallen at Autodesk to give us a brief overview of Autodesk Construction Cloud.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here today. My name is Jeremy Wallen. I have been with the Autodesk team for about 5 years now, and I oversee our ecosystem of amazing integration partners. Today, I'm pleased to share a few details on Autodesk Construction Cloud. Before diving into it, though, I want to take a quick step back and talk about the construction industry as a whole. As you know, a typical construction project is made of multiple teams across all phases of the project lifecycle. Owners, GCs, and subcontractors all use different types of platforms, which makes integration and communication harder and limits project data usage. This issue has an added layer of complexity when we consider the communication between different teams. Fragmentation of data has a huge direct impact on the project. Teams are disconnected and working from outdated information due to multiple apps or even the complete lack of digital adoption, leading to wasted time and security issues. On the project level, the disconnection between the office and the field accounts for massive avoidable rework, impacting project cost, quality, delivery time, and profitability. There's a massive impact at the business level as well. Unused and lost project data is hugely reducing potential opportunities. So let's take a closer look at how Autodesk Construction Cloud connects teams, workflows, and data. Autodesk Construction Cloud brings construction teams together, enabling easier collaboration from a single source of truth. Whether in the office or on the job site, everybody collaborates through connected devices. When we refer to Autodesk Construction Cloud, that is a suite of software that we are delivering to construction teams. You can see from this slide how it has come together over the past couple of years. Autodesk Construction Cloud is encompassed by Autodesk Build, Autodesk BIM Collaborate, which helps design teams in particular, and Autodesk Takeoff, which is a pre-construction tool that allows teams to generate quantities from 2D sheets or 3D models to include in their estimates. Each of these, BIM Collaborate, Takeoff, and Build, work in concert and have an underpinning of Autodesk Docs, 3D models, documents, photos, and everything that construction teams use live within Autodesk Docs and is usable throughout these solutions. You'll see elements of Building Connected, Pipe, Assemble, and ProS get incorporated into Autodesk Construction Cloud as well in the future. As I mentioned, each of these solutions work closely in tandem. Autodesk Docs is the underlying document management behind Autodesk Construction Cloud. Within Autodesk Construction Cloud, there are dashboards, reporting, and APIs to help reduce rework and mitigate risk by giving stakeholders visibility into high-risk issues that can impact project cost, schedule, quality, or safety. Autodesk Build helps drive projects forward by connecting the field and office allows project teams to seamlessly work together, ultimately supporting transparent decision-making to keep projects on track and on budget. You'll see here a number of workflows that Autodesk Build supports. A few of the more widely used ones include document control, issues, RFIs, and insights. First, Autodesk Build provides one place where all team members have access to the right information, anytime, anywhere. Markup tools allow teams to call attention to details on drawings or documents and share them with other team members, whether they're in the field or in the office. 2D drawings and 3D models can be navigated with ease on both the desktop and mobile devices. Project issues allow construction teams to access all design, quality, and safety issues from one place. Issues can be created on the exact location on 2D sheets or 3D models, even when offline. Detailed issue reports can also be easily shared, even with non-team members. With RFIs and Autodesk Build, teams can reduce the risk of data loss and connect RFIs to other tasks across the project lifecycle. Project members can create a new RFI on the web or mobile and then link it to markups and photos taken in the field. Those RFIs can be linked to issues, change orders, files, or photos for seamless collaboration. Lastly, when we talk about insight, we are referring to the capabilities that enable teams to visualize and analyze all of their project data. This is key for project teams to better understand where to prioritize attention. Ultimately, this improves decision-making for both individual project team members as well as executive leaders. Customizable and shareable dashboards allow users to choose various cards from the card library, including Cintoo, Construction IQ cards, and other project analytics cards. With that, I will hand things over to Jonathan.
Hi, everybody. This is Jonathan Evans. I'm with Turner Construction. I'm a VDC manager over in Des Moines, Iowa, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about issue resolution on a billion-dollar project, especially as it relates to the scan to BIM process. So let's dive right in. We've got a lot to cover today. All right, to kick us off today on our content slide, we're going to be talking about a specific project today, so we will give an overview of what that project is without going into too many details. We're going to provide some background on the Turner and Cintoo relationship here. We're going to also talk about the process and lessons learned for a few key items within our overarching process for the project. We're also going to give testimonials and shout-outs their chance to shine. And finally, we'll end up on our final thoughts overall that you can take away and apply on your own projects. All right away in the project overview, here is the public rendering that was released. So even though this is a confidential data center, that at least kind of paints the picture a little bit on the sheer size of the space that's in question here. And this is what we will be talking about today. So you can see some key facts and components about this project, but really I wanted the focus to be more on the extensive reality capture specifications and the precise as-built requirements. So as a lot of you may know, the AEC industry at large is moving more to this as opposed to away from this. So a lot of what we're talking about today is going to be underlined by that fact and kind of reinforcing that fact. So let's keep going. Okay, so following the project overview, I did want to give a little bit of our history with Cintoo. Turner Construction here in Iowa has been working with them for quite some time because we came to them with the question, how do we work with our scan data in a smarter way? So we came to them because we had broken every other storage platform. So I don't want to name names, but think of any cloud platform or any platform that says they can hold large files. Didn't hold these laser scan files, right? So we clearly had an issue there. We were able to meet the Cintoo team at Autodesk University. So I know a lot of you have made connections at Autodesk University as well. So great place for those things. Finally, after a result of those discussions, we were able to roll out a test in the first quarter of 2019. So with that test, we brought in essentially all the end users, us really, and the modeling teams on the trade partners side. We were also to bring in the Cintoo team, so they were able to give their insight into what we were doing. And then finally, we were able to ping some of the project team as well and say, here's what we're trying on the BIM and VDC front. How does this affect your day-to-day? How does this alter how you use this data, so on and so forth? Finally, we were able to work with all of those teams, Cintoo especially, to provide feedback and recommendations, and then continue that partnership through to today. So it's been 5 years now since that partnership, since that first test, believe it or not. So Cintoo has come a long way, we've come a long way, and we're excited to tell you a little bit more about the processes that have resulted. All right, now we're getting into the heart of the process here. Obviously, when you think of scan to BIM, probably the first thing you think of is laser scanning. So the question we were trying to answer for ourselves is what's next for data collection? What's next for laser scanning? As I mentioned before, the client increased the tolerance requirements, increased the amount of scope that had to be captured, and really wanted to narrow in on what they felt provided them value, which is highly, highly accurate digital scans of existing conditions, right? So as built conditions. So what did we have to do? We had to transition from us scanning, which you can see a nice vintage photo of me scanning there, to help from a third party. So that help from a third party came in the form of Olson. Olson on our project is the team that was already performing surveying. With this adjustment, they also included all things reality capture into their scope as well. So we'll talk a bit more about them as the presentation continues. Once we transitioned that work to them, though, the next big thing that we had to figure out was how do we communicate to that team everything that needs to be scanned? And then how do they communicate to us when it was scanned, what was captured versus what wasn't, if there were any difficulties in getting that scan information. So enter the capture request and auditing system, which I'm a big proponent of just using the tools that are available to you to the fullest of their capabilities. So for us, that meant Microsoft Forms. That meant taking the front-facing end-user Microsoft form, formulating it in such a way that we were able to narrow in for the superintendent, for the field folks, information that we needed. We were able to narrow in and say, hey, give us the zone that needs to be scanned, give us a specific area within that zone that needs to be scanned, what is the focus of that scan, and when is that scan no longer going to be available? When is that scope going to be covered up, or when is it going to be inaccessible, right? So by asking 7 or 8 key questions of our superintendents and of our field folks, we were able to get really solid data in that way. Microsoft Forms, if you don't know, has the back-end spreadsheet that records all of the survey responses on. So we use that back-end spreadsheet to communicate with the Olson team and with a few more teams that we're going to talk about in the future, and provided that transparency to everyone, right? So once the field team was trained up on what they should be asking for, when they should be asking for it, understanding what the client needed versus what was just a nice to have, quote unquote, we really started to get good data from those teams, and then good data from all of the teams down the line, which we'll talk a bit more about. All right, before we continue on the great data piece and, kind of showing the bright and shinies, I think alongside the bright and shinies, it's always nice to show the lessons learned. What was the hurdle? How did you improve? How did you grow from that hurdle? So for us in laser scanning, you can see in the hopper there, probably the top 3 hurdles. So even though it was all contained in a spreadsheet, which you can manipulate any number of ways, it's still a lot of text-based data, right? It's still just walls and walls of text. Couple that with required versus supplementary scope. So some of these superintendents, they really latched on to laser scanning, or they had come from projects that use laser scanning. They wanted stuff laser scanned. So how do we balance what is a want to have or a would be nice to have from a superintendent alongside the client's actual requirements for reality capture? And then finally, planned versus completed scan coverage. So it is a massive, massive site, just like we showed at the beginning. And there are multiple phases of construction, as a lot of us know. So how do we phase by phase understand what's been captured versus what hasn't, communicate that data accurately, and then continue to move forward along the path of capture without double capturing, missing a capture, just basically making sure that we're capturing everything to the best of our abilities, right? So those are the top 3 hurdles. Really the overarching, if you had to put it into one word, the overarching solution to that or improvement for that was transparency. So we decided that it would be best for us to just open up the floodgates and give all the right people, not everyone, but all the right people access to the back-end spreadsheet that Microsoft Forms generates, and then to allow them to have custom fields within that spreadsheet. So by opening that access to the scan request tracker to those different teams, they're actively able to engage and see what the field team submitted for scan. The Olson team was able to say, okay, here's the exact person that scanned it. Here's the day they scanned it. Here's the scanner they used whenever they scanned it. Here are any area-specific issues or notes that happened whenever they scanned it. And then they were able to transition it to the next team, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Right? So just transparency, transparency, transparency. It's a lot of data and a lot of information, but by kind of softening the blow a little bit and spreading that information and that data across trusted team members, we're able to leverage that and use it in a much more intelligent way. The field team training and the walkthrough of what was important, what wasn't, what is contractually bound, what isn't, was huge, right? We had to have those conversations a number of times, obviously. You provide trainings, you provide hands-on assistance, and then you continue to audit and maintain. Really, that was our biggest lessons learned, just bringing them into the process, training them up on the process, and then providing feedback as they were working through the process on their own for the first time. Something that Olson was able to do is also incorporate ArcGIS alongside the room lists. So what I mean by that and what they really did with that process is they were able to tie ArcGIS data with laser scan data and project-specific data to kind of give more flavor to the planned versus complete scan coverage. And what I mean by that is, and this is a topic for another presentation, they were able to pull scan data into ArcGIS to show the exact point cloud area of the scan versus the floor plan that the scan was performed on. So very, very cool. They tied a lot of metadata to that based on the spreadsheet that we already talked about, to where if you were to check on or hover over a scan for any given area, the metadata would show when that area was scanned, who scanned it, all the same stuff that's on the spreadsheet, but essentially the visual component to the spreadsheet. So by, again, leveraging our team, trusting our team, empowering our team to use our tools but also come up with their own tools, we're able to, again, leverage transparency to provide a fuller, more complete deliverable to the client. So a lot of huge lessons learned for laser scanning. Last slide was laser scanning, then this one must be scan to BIM. So we're going to talk about the process evolution for scan to BIM and purely that process, right? We'll talk about the results of that process after this. So if I didn't use leverage enough in the last slide, I'm going to use a little bit more and say, how do we leverage this data? That was the question we were asking ourselves, right? It's a lot of data. It can sometimes be hard to access, hard to use, hard to look at, etc. Well, enter Cintoo, right? Just like we've been talking about. That was the platform that we found out about, that we tested, and then now we're using to store these scans, share these scans, and now compare these scans. So that was our sharing problem answered, but now our bigger problem was, how do we take all of this data and compare it versus all of this other data? So how do we take all of this scan data, of which there's a massive amount, and then compare it versus the massive amount of model data? Well, enter again the TTS team, the Turner Technical Services team. So this is a arm of Turner that was able to provide us much needed assistance to be able to pour through the numerous issues that we were seeing in the scan to BIM process, properly assign those issues to the appropriate trade partners, and track those issues through to resolution. By bringing them into the capture, request, and auditing system, by giving them, call it their own section in that spreadsheet that we were referencing earlier, we're able to give them more insight into the process. So again, more transparency into the process to say, alongside all the other data that we've collected, to also say, here's what they're contributing, here's who's reviewing the scans, here are the issues that are resulting from these scans, and here's what's done to close these issues, right? So we were able to really allocate the review responsibilities across their team, our team, to make sure that scans were getting reviewed, issues were being identified, and then ultimately being closed. Finally, the underlining piece to all of this was continued collaboration with Cintoo, where we used BIMtrack for issue resolution, assigning issues, getting issues closed out, as I'm sure many of you folks in similar positions are. And we were also using BIM 360 docs. So how do we coordinate, collaborate with those different teams to get them all meshed up together to make our workflow smoother, to make the trade partners' workflow smoother, to get issues closed faster and better than before, right? So Cintoo was able to work with us, work with the different teams to make sure that they were able to integrate these different platforms within each other. Huge boon to the entire process, because again, by meshing those together, we're able to identify issues in Cintoo, push those issues into BIMtrack directly, one for one. assign those issues to trade partners just directly within the issue identification process and then move on from there. There was no copy, paste, double work, rework, whatever you want to think of it as. It was all located within that same process, right? That's very iterative and that's a high overview. It took a lot of time to get there, but that is where we ended up. All of this couldn't have been possible without detailed notes on procedures and how things were working together. So white papers essentially that we were able to provide to the different TTS folks that were working with us. Weekly check-in meetings with the Olson team and now with the TTS team to make sure that on the Olson side, scan coverage is accurate, scan availability is accurate, that they're proceeding per the plan. And then with the TTS team to make sure that issues are being identified correctly, to narrow in on any noise issues, to narrow in on anything that's out of scope versus in scope. The list goes on, but essentially continuous communication throughout the entire process, now with this TTS team included, was extremely key to the entire operation. Now, kind of naturally in the last slide, as we were talking about the process adjustments, we also talked about the hurdles, but here are those hurdles and some of the continuous improvements that we found along the way. The top three being just the volume of issues. Now, again, we have top tier trade partners that install things highly accurately, but the reality is whenever you get down to the sub-inch tolerance level, you're going to have a huge number of issues whenever you have something of this size and this scope, right? So we needed really all hands on deck for these thousands of issues that we were running into. And the models themselves were big, right? We had huge models. Now, we can talk all day about the different file types, the different compression methods, the different cropping, cutting, however you want to divide up in section models. But the reality is, any way you slice it, there's still going to be big models, right? You're really not going to find a good way to get around that is more or less efficient than other ways. They're just going to be big models. So how did we work around and work through that? And then finally, separate time zones. It may seem obvious at first, but it's a considerable hurdle because you're on completely different wavelengths. You're at different parts in your day, right? You're beginning your day, you're ending your day at different times than other folks, while all expecting to support, communicate, and work through issues with those folks. So how does that look? How do you balance all of that information? How do you stay connected and on the same path, right? Really, the best overarching answer that we found for that is just collaboration, right? Continued collaboration. Like I mentioned, it is continuous communication, meetings, discussions. It's not just another meeting on the calendar. It is truly a touch point in your week or in your day where you can make sure that you're on the same page, that you're tracking towards the same goal, that questions are getting answered and no one's getting left behind. But even besides that, the overarching improvements that got us to that collaborative state were truly the integrations that Cintoo, Autodesk, and BIMtrack were able to make possible, right? By having a stable model storage platform in BIM 360 Docs, by having a stable laser scanning and sharing platform in Cintoo, and then by having our issue tracking software of choice in BIMtrack and meshing all three of those together, we're able to work with all these different teams to come up with a solution that worked best for us and our process, that made it so that rework, double work, whatever you want to think of it as, wasn't there, right? We were able to really hone in on something that worked really nicely for our teams because we were open, because we were collaborative, and because we were having these discussions with everybody on the team, not just me to Cintoo or not just, us off in our own little bubbles here. Along those same notes, sharing those best practices and workflows openly and freely with our partners at TTS, our partners at Olson, even our partners at Cintoo and Autodesk was key, right? We wanted them to know what worked best, and we wanted them to understand how it affected their process and could make their process better, could make their platform better, could make their software better, whatever the case may be, right? So that sharing of best practices and workflows was huge. For TTS specifically, this is its own special bullet point because by having white papers and process documents readily available, it cuts down on the guesswork. It narrows in on what the expectation is. It clarifies what's in spec versus out of spec. It does so much to just provide basically a gating mechanism to say yes versus no for any given issue, that it's worth your 20-30 minutes to create the document because it saves you hours and hours of time later on. So a lot of hurdles involved with, again, the scan to BIM process at this volume and at this scale, but these are really the ones that helped us the most in our process. All right, getting to the home stretch here. The final process evolution was in the issue resolution phase. So now that we've scanned the project and we've performed scan to BIM comparison, now we're assigning and resolving those issues, right? We're assigning those issues to the appropriate trade partners. They're resolving the issues, right? So how do we provide value to the project through this entire process? So that value is to the project, the entire project, not just us, not just our trade partners, not just the client or the design team, everyone across the entire project. The top three things that we did to really hone in on providing value to the project was reducing noise by working directly with the client to say, this is what your document says is important and is in spec versus out of spec. Here's what we're encountering in the scan to BIM process, the amount of issues that we're finding of this type or that type, right? Really making sure that the client was aware of the reality. I mean, let's put it honestly, right? The reality of an extensive plan like this to capture so much information, to have such a tight tolerance, and to understand what resulted from that. So ultimately, whenever we had those discussions with the client, we were able to address some of these issues, and we were able to narrow in even further on the scope that was more important. So it was time well spent, right? Highly recommend all other folks to do the same where they're available. But again, it's the nature of a collaborative project that you're able to have these types of conversations. The next big one was the growth of TTS's independence. So because of the processes, the white papers, the discussions, the one-on-one time from my team, shout out to those folks, the one-on-one time with the TTS team and the other support folks that you're going to see in the shout out section in just a second, all the time spent to make sure that they went from essentially having a bottleneck through us, through the project team that said, assign the issues to us first, and then we'll assign them to the trade partners. By being able to remove that over time, that was huge. They increased their accuracy to 98+% to where we grew and continue to grow to really trust them to assign issues accurately, on time and on the schedule that's outlined for them, and make sure that our trade partners realize that that's what they're being held to, that an issue assigned from those folks is the same as an issue assigned from us, right? By doing this, right, having those conversations with the client, growing TTS's independence, we were also able to couple that with just metrics, saying, we're keeping track of the number of open issues versus closed issues. We're keeping track of how many are being put back into our court for further review and auditing, and we're sharing that with our leadership and really everyone's leadership so that everyone stays on the right path and so that everyone keeps the momentum up, right? When you get on jobs like this, the momentum has to stay there for the resolution of issues. And just by sharing openly again and transparently all of the data and all of the metrics, it was a huge boon to the entire process, because then you can point directly to a number, a chart, a figure to say, look, this is where we're at. This is where we need to be by X date. Here's how we're going to get there. Help us get there, right? What's your plan to help us get there? All right, for our final hurdle and continuous improvement slide, the issue resolution hurdles that we faced. So the complex systems can't be underscored enough, can't be highlighted enough, because really projects like this one, it is so complex up and downstream of every single issue that you're identifying that having a holistic systems-based view of the entire process is really the only way to move forward and accurately identify the issues that you're seeing in the scan to BIM process. Speaking of that, all of those issues, the granular data, the great thing about modern laser scanners is they capture a lot. The sometimes bad thing about modern laser scanners is that they capture a lot, right? So you're going to see everything down to really its finest detail, right? Laid bare. So you need to understand and be ready for that level of detail. Have those conversations that we were having, and have those processes outlined that we were outlining, and making sure that everyone's staying on top of it and that's everyone's staying transparent in their efforts. Then finally, unfamiliar with field conditions. This is an important one for our process and an important hurdle that was in our process, because again, the TTS team was off-site. We're an international team working on a project, right? So they didn't know about field conditions like we knew about field conditions. The improvements that we encountered really along the way that we built up and that we iterated on along the way were, like we said before, those detailed processes and frequent Q&A sessions were huge, right? But once we started throwing 360 photos into the mix to give additional context to the laser scans and to the project, that was massive, right? Because then you have another form of reality capture, another way of viewing the project that adds flavor and adds depth to something that already has a lot of flavor and depth, but that can always benefit from a little bit more, right? If you're stuck on an issue in one particular place and it looks a certain way in the laser scan, you can go back, check a 360 capture, see how it looked in the 360 capture up and downstream of that particular issue, and then go back a lot more confident in the issue that you're identifying, right? Huge, huge, huge. The metrics that we talked a lot about, that was a massive improvement, right? If at first you want to just keep things, again, siloed or quiet because it's a lot of issues and it can cause some alarm, don't. Be open and send that information, show that information to the different teams to say, look, this is where we were, this is where we need to be, here's where we are now. How do we get to the next stage? How do we meet the deadlines? How do we ensure that we're providing the most value to the project as possible, right? And then finally, the clear communication, right? So shifting processes, new people assigning issues, new processes for assigning those issues, new issue closure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure that you're communicating and maintaining clear communication with all the project stakeholders, right? The overarching thing for the hurdles and continuous improvement for issue resolution was just documentation, making sure that you have white papers, processes, meetings on the books, communications with all the stakeholders, a real clear picture of where you were, where you are, and where you're going, right? That's the biggest takeaway that we found for this entire process. All right, I shrunk myself down real small for this one because I want the focus to be on the team, their shout outs and their testimonials throughout the entire process, right? They're really the ones who are making all of this happen. They're the ones who are identifying what's working, what's not. They're identifying who is supporting, who is providing value to the process, who is, making sure that all of this is flowing smoothly and correctly so that ultimately, like I said, the value is there, it's captured, and it's given to the client at the end of the day. So I do hope you'll take time to read through each of these testimonials and shout-outs because, again, they're all special. They're all coming from a place of appreciation, collaboration, and support for one another. Well, folks, I've done my best to summarize and go through all this information as quickly as possible. And even though it is a years-long process with a lot of evolution, a lot of bumps in the road, a lot of lessons learned and continuous improvements, if I had to put it all down into one single slide, this is the best I can do. So, question we have to answer for ourselves as we kind of talk about all of this and come to the end of this process is, how do we summarize an extensive amount of learning and growth into takeaways that you can apply? So transparency, collaboration, and documentation, those were the three big takeaways from each of our roadblocks and continuous improvement slides. So hopefully you understood those and the value of each of those in your process. But some of the ones that we didn't touch on as heavily include the leadership buy-in component. So I talked specifically a bit about the client discussions, the trade partner and project leadership discussions when it comes to metrics, but you need to make sure that you have that buy-in. You need to make sure that they understand the deliverable and its associated value. See, nice little segue. Because if leadership doesn't understand what's happening, why we're being asked to provide this deliverable, and then they also don't understand the platform, software, people needed to supply that deliverable, you're going to find yourself in a very difficult place, right? So having that open communication, having those collaborative open discussions, maintaining transparency, that is all critical. You cannot not do that. Otherwise, your process is going to fail just outright, right? So you need to make sure that you're spending the time to have those conversations, understanding that you will be asked questions, but then able to answer those questions with the deliverables and how they impact the job. Advocacy for each team's unique contributions is something that I'm personally very passionate about. I wanted to make sure, as you saw in the shout out section, that each team got their flowers, each team got the recognition that they deserve because they've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours. We've all spent hundreds of hours on this process, right? Just because I'm the one who's presenting here today, their accomplishments are really the greater, right? They're the ones who have put in the time, put in the effort, put in the energy to make sure that laser scans are collected. Those laser scans are positioned correctly. The information in those laser scans contains what we need it to contain. it's named correctly, it's put in the right spot, it's compared correctly, issues are identified. You know what I mean? It goes on and on and on, but it is such a multi-part process that each individual team's contributions have to be recognized, not only in situations like this, but also all throughout the entire process. So as you're looking to do something on your own and as you're looking to potentially replicate something like this, keep that in mind because it'll go a long way in making sure that you're getting as much collaboration, as much evolution, as much growth as possible, as opposed to being stuck in a little box. Speaking of that, the ability to adapt and ask for assistance, right? You have to know when something isn't working. You have to recognize that there's almost always going to be a better way. And then you have to say, look, here's what we're doing now that we feel works. What can you do to work with us to build on the success that we're already having? So making sure that you're able to ask those questions, to ask for help, to come to the table prepared with suggestions, but also with ideas is huge. So that concludes what I have for today. I'm going to pass it off to Nick Zarnick for some more information from the Cintoo team, and thank you for the time. Hope to hear some questions from you after this. Bye.
Hey everyone, my name is Nicholas Zarnick, Customer Success Manager here at Cintoo, and I'll start with a brief introduction to Cintoo and what we do. At its core, Cintoo takes 3D point cloud data and converts it into high-resolution 3D mesh surfaces. Our point cloud to mesh process retains the same resolution and level of accuracy as the source scan data and also reduces the overall file size of the data by about 10 to 20 times. This allows us to stream and display the mesh data in a typical web browser. Our core technology is also unique because it allows you to download the 3D data back in its original point cloud format for use in various third-party design and engineering applications. This means Cintoo also allows you to distribute your reality capture data without compromising on resolution or accuracy. This core technology is the foundation of Cintoo, an open, mesh-based SaaS platform for your reality capture, BIM, and CAD data. As a company, we're SOC 2 Type 2 certified, which means we operate at the highest level of cybersecurity standards for SaaS platforms, and we offer the flexibility to host data across various Amazon or Microsoft Azure data centers, depending on the requirements of your organization or your project. The Cintoo platform is really about taking all kinds of 3D and 2D data, documentation, and business information to establish a reference source of truth for various use cases. From scan to BIM workflows and comparing existing conditions to design or as-built 3D models, to asset management and operations, or even advanced 3D simulation. And because the real world is made of surfaces, Cintoo is your 3D mesh-based visual twin platform that provides the most trustful representation of your captured data. It allows unlimited users to easily view, share, collaborate, and distribute all kinds of data essential to digital twin ecosystems, making Cintoo your ultimate source of truth. Currently, Cintoo is used by more than 400 companies in over 40 countries across the globe, and more than 4 million scans and 25,000 models have been uploaded to Cintoo so far, which is a testament to the scalability and robustness of our platform. Next, we'll talk about some updates and new features that have been added to Cintoo in the past year. Starting with hardware multimodality, Cintoo has always been optimized for terrestrial scan data and imagery coming from various tripod-mounted devices, and we continue to expand the list of supported mobile scanning solutions. In the past year, we've added support for data captured by drones and UAVs, and we've made significant performance improvements to how Cintoo processes and essentially restructures the 3D data coming from drones and mobile scanners. Continuing on the topic of mobile scans, we've introduced support for the display of intensity information in mobile scan data, in addition to the color, 3D surface, and other Cintoo 3D display modes. With the regulatory need to provide privacy for individuals, Cintoo now provides always-on automatic face blurring for anyone captured in terrestrial and mobile scan data. On the topic of exporting and downloading data, scans can now be exported from Cintoo in POD format to use in Bentley point tools and other applications. Cintoo now has enhanced support for uploading additional 3D model file types. DWG, JT, SAP, and STEP files can all be uploaded to Cintoo from your local hard drive, and DGN, SDP, and STEP files can now be imported to Cintoo from Autodesk Construction Cloud. Now you can select and display multiple work zone folders together in the main view of the Data tab. Easily search, select multiple items, and download all the files you need from Cintoo. Along with the new Data tab, we've also added the ability to select multiple files simultaneously and batch update models from Autodesk Construction Cloud. Now every single model file from ACC in Cintoo can be selected and updated with a few mouse clicks. Also, with our Autodesk integration, annotations in Cintoo can now be pushed directly to the Issues tool in Autodesk Construction Cloud. Issues pushed to ACC also include a direct link back to the Cintoo project for seamless project coordination. Recently, we introduced a new set of tools for tagging assets and equipment in Cintoo. The first method is manual asset tagging, which gives you full control and flexibility to create tags, define tag metadata, and fully customize tag properties. The second method is using data from your existing digital twin, BIM, or CAD models to generate asset tags in Cintoo. Importing tag lists to Cintoo automatically populates asset tag metadata and properties, saving you time and effort. And asset tags can also be created by extracting the properties and metadata from BIM or CAD models that are already uploaded to Cintoo. And the third method for tagging assets is using Cintoo's AI engine to automatically detect and classify common industrial objects in the scan data. Cintoo's AI engine reads the 3D surface display in addition to panoramic imagery, which increases the accuracy of object detection. The Cintoo AI engine replaces the cumbersome manual tag process with an automated, faster, easier, and more accurate approach. And that's the last update we'll cover for now, so I'll hand it back to Rob. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Nicholas. Yeah, so first I'd like to give a shout out to our presenters today, to Jeremy, to Jonathan, and to Nicholas. Excellent job. I really appreciate the hard effort they put into putting these presentations together for you all. And so now we would like to start off with some Q&A. So the first one is for Jeremy. Jeremy, you there?
Yep, I'm here.
All right. So, and we do get this question quite a bit. So the question is kind of general, but does Autodesk Construction Cloud have the same functionality as BIM 360?
Yeah, great question. So Autodesk Construction Cloud, as I was showing in my presentation, is encompassed of three key products: Autodesk Build, Autodesk BIM Collaborate, and Autodesk Takeoff. And again, that's all underpinned by Autodesk Docs, so it's a common data environment for all three of those solutions. BIM 360 and PlanGrid more or less came together into Autodesk Build. So our R&D team took the best of both, expanded on those features, made it better, and created Autodesk Build, which is used by builders in the field, in the office, on their construction teams. So I guess the short answer is that Autodesk Construction Cloud is new and improved from BIM 360.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. Jonathan, I got a question for you. So I guess the overarching question here is what type of scanners did you use? And I think people are trying to figure out, was it all terrestrial or did you use any mobile backpack scanners? Can you kind of give us an overview of what type of scan equipment you used on this project?
Yeah, sure thing. No, that's a great question. So for our project specifically, the terrestrial scanners really won out. We trialed some mobile mapping, some SLAM scanning solutions, but just with that sub-inch level of detail, that sub-inch level of tolerance on much of the scope, at the time that we tested about a year ago, it just wasn't a sufficient amount of accuracy or resolution for us to be able to incorporate into our process versus the terrestrial scanners that we were using.
Cool. Thank you, sir. Here's kind of a general question. I'll throw this to you, Nick. So there was a couple questions that came in around connecting to ACC and connecting to BIM track. Can you just kind of give an overview of how Cintoo does that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so first of all, for our connection to Autodesk Construction Cloud, the main use cases are being able to connect your Cintoo project. You have various types of laser scan data, types of 3D data. You can connect your Cintoo project to your Autodesk projects, and then you can actually pull in and import model data, CAD drawings from your Autodesk Construction Cloud project into your Cintoo project to be able to view your reality capture data along with your BIM or CAD data within the 3D view in Cintoo. That's the primary use case for Autodesk Construction Cloud, and we can also push annotations, notes, and issues that are created within the Cintoo platform into Autodesk Construction Cloud as issues. So you can use those two kind of connections to both import model data and then push annotations and issues from Cintoo into ACC. And then on the BIM track, or now they're calling it New Forma Connect side, it's a similar use case for being able to take the annotations, notes, issues that are created within the Cintoo platform and be able to push those out as BIM track or New Forma Connect issues to be able to use those in that platform. So really around issue tracking and coordination for those use cases.
Thank you, sir. Another one for Jonathan. I'm trying to figure out how to summarize this, but it looks like the client asked for scan, excuse me, for scan data at the beginning of the project. Is this something that you took into account? And is this something that you see with other projects as well? Are owners asking for this scan data, and are they asking it to be handed over at the end of the project?
Resounding yes. So that's something that we saw, especially on this project, and we're starting to see more and more, right? I think futurists among us may say that as-built models and drawings are going away in favor of as-built reality capture solutions. I think we're a good ways away from that, but we're definitely starting to see these laser scans and other reality capture methods or types be part of the client deliverable at the end of the project.
All right. Just looking through some of these real quick. We'll ask one more. Let's see here. Yeah, this was one that I kind of thought was interesting. So working with a third party, it sounded like collaboration and really defining a process was key. And I really liked during your presentation where you talked about the process side of it. So I think a takeaway, and Jonathan, I'll let you elaborate on this, is, when you start out these projects, I think a lot of people think it's simple. You just go out and collect data and expect it to magically do things for you. But you need to have a process or a workflow as how do you extract the value out of that data. And also, Jonathan, I think another thing you brought up was it's a living document. So there's constantly being changes made to it. Would you care to elaborate just a little bit more around that?
Sure. I would say the biggest elaboration alongside all the documentation items that you touched on is truly developing and continuing the partnership. So if the scanning team, if the reality capture team, if the surveying team, which in this case for us was all one company, if they can be integrated into the process through the documentation and through the methodology that you've laid out, but also become integrated into the team, just kind of as a natural result of that level of collaboration, that's in everyone's best interest, because then everyone can stay aligned on, again, what the goals are, what the focuses are, what the challenges are week over week, month over month, and then work through together.
Great. Well, thank you. So that's all we have for today. Any questions, please reach out to us. You can reach us at sales@cintoo.com. Once again, I want to thank all of our presenters today. Excellent job. If any of you have ever done this before, it does take quite a time commitment to put these together. So really appreciate our presenters today for doing that. Also, we've had a couple questions. This will be recorded, as has been recorded, so you will be receiving an email in the next 24 hours directing you to that link to share with others. With that, I would like to sign off and say thank you to everyone for attending and look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Thanks.